Jarren Duran just said out loud what every Red Sox fan has been thinking since opening day. After Boston's fourth loss in 5 games, he admitted the team is putting too much pressure on themselves, that they are pressing, that they are trying to do too much. And while that sounds like a player trying to stay calm and keep the mood positive, what it actually did was confirm something much bigger. This is not just a slow start. Something is genuinely broken in the way this team is operating right now. But the pressing is only part of it, because what Duran did not say, and what nobody in that clubhouse is talking about publicly, is that the roster itself is making the problem worse. The structure is off, the roles are unclear, and the players are feeling it every single night. When you connect those two things together, the picture gets a lot darker than a simple April slump. If you are tired of watching this team struggle without real answers, subscribe right now, because this channel covers the Red Sox every single day, and we are not going to look away from this. Stay with us. Here is what we know. The Boston Red Sox are sitting at 9 wins and 15 losses after 24 games. That puts them tied for the second worst record in the American League, ahead of only the Kansas City Royals. Think about that for a second. The Kansas City Royals, a team that nobody picked to compete this year, and Boston is right there next to them at the bottom of the conference standings. That is not where this roster was supposed to be. Not even close. The offense is ranked 26th in the league in runs scored with just 90 runs through the first 24 games. They are dead last in home runs with 13. And as a team, they are hitting just .226, which ranks 23rd in baseball. Those are not numbers you expect from a team that went out and added Sonny Gray, Wilson Contreras, and Ranger Suarez this offseason. That was a team trying to win now. That was a front office that made a statement. And right now, the field is not reflecting that investment at all. The pitching, to be fair, has held up better than the record suggests. That part deserves credit. Gray has been solid. The rotation has given this team chances to win. But all the starting pitching depth in the world means nothing if you cannot put runs on the board. And right now, Boston is one of the worst offensive teams in baseball. That is not an overreaction. That is just what the numbers say. Now, here's where the story starts to get more serious and more complicated. After the loss to the New York Yankees, their 4th loss in 5 games, Jarren Duran spoke to the media about what is going on inside this team. He said they are not in a hole yet. He said it is still early. He said the team plays best when they just play freely and stop trying to force results. And look, from a player's perspective, that kind of mindset makes complete sense. You cannot let a rough April turn into a full mental collapse. Staying calm and trusting the process is the right message in a clubhouse. Nobody disputes that. But here is the thing. Duran himself is hitting .194. His OPS plus entering that game was 43. He had 3 hits against the Yankees, and it moved his average to .194 and his OPS plus to 64. Those are still bad numbers, and he is the best player in that lineup. He is one of the best outfielders in the American League. He is the guy this offense is supposed to be built around, and even he is nowhere near where he needs to be. So when Duran tells us the team is pressing and trying too hard, that is not just a generic post-game quote. That is the face of this offense describing a real psychological problem affecting real at-bats every single night. When a player of Duran's caliber comes out and publicly says his team is not playing freely, that is a signal that the environment around this group is generating anxiety rather than confidence. And in baseball, anxiety does not stay contained. It spreads. It shows up in pitch selection. It shows up in 2-strike approaches. It shows up in base running decisions. It shows up in the kind of passive at-bats where a hitter takes a fastball right down the middle because he is thinking too hard instead of just reacting. That is what pressing looks like from the outside. And that is what Red Sox fans have been watching for 3 weeks now. Here is the part that most fans may be missing, and this is the real story underneath the record. The roster construction is actively making the mental problem worse. And that is a serious issue because you cannot fix a mental problem while the structural problem is still feeding it. Think about the outfield situation for a second. On any given night, one of the following players is sitting: Roman Anthony, Masataka Yoshida, Jarren Duran, Will Abreu, or Ceddanne Rafaela. 5 legitimate outfielders. One of them is on the bench every night. How do you build a consistent approach at the plate when you do not even know if you are starting the next day? How does a young player like Roman Anthony develop rhythm and confidence when he might play 3 days in a row and then sit for 2? You cannot build consistency from instability. That is just not how hitting works. And that instability is directly feeding the pressure that Duran described. One idea that circulated recently was moving Rafaela to second base. The logic was simple: open up the outfield, give everyone consistent opportunities, create structural clarity in the lineup. It made sense on paper. Alex Cora shut it down immediately. 3 words: not right now. And from a pure defensive standpoint, you can understand why. Rafaela won the American League Gold Glove in center field in 2025. He might be the best defensive center fielder in baseball right now. You do not move a player like that casually, and you certainly do not experiment with his positioning in the middle of a tough stretch. But here is what Cora's answer also did. It confirmed that the team does not have a clean solution available. If the Rafaela move is off the table, the 5 outfielder rotation problem does not disappear. It just sits there, rotating confusion into the lineup every single night, denying players the consistency they need to find their swing and their confidence. And at some point, not having a solution is itself a decision with consequences. Now let us talk about the infield, because that side of the field is not helping enough either. Wilson Contreras has been a bright spot, and Trevor Story has shown some flashes of what made him one of the best shortstops in the game before injuries derailed him. But Marcelo Mayer, Caleb Durbin, Jarren Duran in certain lineup configurations, and even Story himself have all posted averages below .200 at various points this season. When you have that many hitters in the bottom tier of offensive production at the same time, you cannot explain it away with sample size. That is a real pattern, and it points back to the same root issue. This lineup does not have a clear identity, and the players inside it are not operating with the freedom and structure they need to perform. The pressure in Boston is starting to build in ways that go beyond the fan base. Local media is asking harder questions. The national conversation around this team has shifted from cautious optimism to genuine concern, and the front office is now in a difficult position. Do they let this ride through May and trust that the talent will eventually click? Or do they start making uncomfortable decisions now before the deficit becomes too large to overcome? Those decisions could include restructuring the lineup to give younger players like Roman Anthony a defined everyday role instead of a rotating spot. It could mean sending one of the younger infielders to AAA, not as a punishment, but as a way to give them consistent at-bats and let them rediscover their game without the pressure of a struggling major league environment. It could mean having a very direct internal conversation about roles, expectations, and what this team actually looks like when it is playing its best baseball. Because right now, nobody seems to have a clear answer to that question. Here is the honest truth about this Red Sox team. The talent is real. Duran is right about that. Roman Anthony is one of the most exciting young outfielders in baseball, and he is still figuring out how to be a big leaguer every day. Trevor Story, when healthy and confident, is a legitimate offensive contributor up and down the lineup. Yoshida is a professional hitter who knows the strike zone better than almost anyone on this roster. Marcelo Mayer is one of the best young shortstops the Red Sox have developed in years. This is not a bad team. On paper, this is a team that should be competing. But talent without structure, without consistency, and without mental freedom does not perform. And right now, Boston does not have any of those 3 things working together at the same time. The structure is unclear, the consistency is absent, and the mental freedom that Duran himself said is essential is not there. All 3 problems are feeding each other in a loop that is very hard to break without someone making a decisive move. What comes next is the question every Red Sox fan needs to be watching. If the offense does not start producing over the next 10 to 12 games, the conversations around this roster are going to get louder, harder, and more uncomfortable The AL East will not wait. The Yankees are pulling away. The division is not going to pause while Boston figures itself out. Every loss now is a deficit that has to be recovered later, and recovering ground in the American League East is one of the hardest things to do in baseball. Watch how Cora handles the lineup over the next week. Watch whether any quiet positional adjustments start happening, even if nothing is announced publicly. Watch for any movement on the roster, whether that is a call-up, a send-down, or something more significant. And most importantly, watch Duran. Because when Jarren Duran is playing freely, playing with confidence, playing like the player he was in 2025, this offense has a completely different energy. The lineup moves differently, the at-bats look different, the pressure on everyone else goes down. If that version of Duran shows up and the structure around him stabilizes even slightly, this team can go on a run. But if the pressing continues, if the roster confusion stays unresolved, and if the front office decides to be patient when the situation is actually calling for action, this problem is going to get much harder to solve. April losses in a division like this have a way of becoming May deficits, and May deficits have a way of becoming seasons that slip away before anyone is ready to admit it. The Red Sox have been here before. They have come back from worse starts and made real runs at October. That history is real, and it matters. But the teams that came back from those slow starts did not do it by waiting. They did it by making decisions, by finding clarity, by giving their best players the freedom and the structure to perform. Right now, this team has the first ingredient. The talent is there. They need the other two. And Jarren Duran, whether he meant to or not, just told the entire baseball world exactly what is missing.